Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam Podcast. In this episode, my guest is the fabulous Kirk Vallis. Kirk is a creativity expert, a great thinker and great advisor on all things creativity based and innovation. And in our conversation, we got into this idea about how you can actually build the practice of creativity in your life. It's the idea that actually sometimes we're so set in our ways. You know, this is how I usually approach my task versus actually are there different ways I could think about doing it that might give me a different insight, a different perspective, or help me have more impact. And also really interestingly, the fact that, you know, important jobs, important things that people are working on, serious jobs can actually be helped by having a little bit of fun. And I think that's a really interesting point for us to think about. Just because it's serious doesn't mean it can't be fun. And Kirk was also saying that people who are in some of those big jobs, some of those important, scary, enormous jobs, tend to actually be quite creative because they're naturally curious about other things. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. This time we are joined by the fantastic Kirk Vallis, and I'm really looking forward to getting into our conversation today. I talk to Kirk a lot and I've had the pleasure of working with him on many occasions, and I find his insights fascinating and interesting, and he's generally just a really cool person to have a conversation with. So Kirk is going to introduce himself in a moment, and I'd love for him to tell us more about his story, what he does, and his journey to get to where he is today. So Kirk, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Beth. Wow, do you know what? It used to be a measure of how clear your description of what you did for a living was when you sat at a dinner party and someone asked you, and as you're telling them, you could just see them kind of starting to shift, looking in the other direction, talking to somebody else. So luckily, I haven't had many dinner parties this year for obvious reasons. But so let me have a go at the latest version. I help people use creativity to solve problems, and that sounds a little bit negative, problems, or maximize opportunities, shall we say. I do it in two ways, either projects. So there's a project that a team is working on that they want to think differently around and want some movement in their thinking or to disrupt themselves a little bit. So I can help them on that to facilitate that with techniques and tricks and things like that. So an example might be at Google, how do we help people have a better relationship with their tech? Digital well-being is a big thing, and we take it seriously. And the reality is, it's hard to move the needle there. So I've done a bit of work with that team on helping them to think differently around that. Or it could be the England rugby team's senior men's side. How do we outthink the opposition to have a competitive edge during the last World Cup? I also spend most of my time designing and delivering training, workshops, sessions, or interactions. You know, we're good at using multimodality now to give people the skills, techniques, approaches, and importantly, the mindset to help make that an everyday thing. It's no coincidence that the World Economic Forum, McKinsey, everywhere you look, credible sources citing creativity as being, amongst the most, if not the most important skill required this year. So, and interestingly, the World Economic Forum forecasted that in 2015, that in 2020 it would be one of the most demanded skills in work. So they clearly had a good insight into the pandemic that was heading our way, because that's certainly accelerated things.
Their crystal ball worked quite well there.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were predicting it for a different reason. Technology, things like that, not a bloody massive pandemic that was going to mess up the entire world. So that's what I do. So listen, if there's one good thing about this year, for me, it's that I used to have to spend a disproportionate amount of time, especially in new relationships, having to help people, almost like sell to people the importance of creativity. But if there's one thing that's happened this year, is that everybody has seen it. Everybody has had to be creative, to flex, to do things a bit differently to have impact in whatever they do, right? So that's been a massive, the acceleration, if you like, of people sitting there going, I value this. Now, we still have to address what does it mean, that word creativity and innovation and disruption, and they're all really loaded terms that often are used in context in business that doesn't help. But how do we, so we still have to do a bit of that, but actually people are leaning in going, I recognize it's important that how we think and how we look at things differently is essential.
So interesting, isn't it? I heard it called a lot of times the year of the pivot, where everyone's having to be creative and change and do things differently. So it gets people really interested. Yet, and you talked to me a bit about this, I know a lot of people, if you say the word creativity, their instant reaction is, but I'm not very creative. And I think it is a loaded word. And I'd be really interested to hear from you around this term creativity. How do you see it? How do you interpret it in the business, in the working context, versus some of the other things? Like, people assume that creativity is you can draw or you can play an instrument, or it's very artistic in that way. So unpick that a bit for us.
So my day job is, I spend most of my time working for Google, which is brilliant, and it gives me an opportunity to go and play in other areas as well. But but at Google, we kind of sort of lucky because what I'm not burdened with there is the relationship with the term creativity to the arts, right? Okay, people don't think that, but it's still loaded. I'm either creative or I'm not. So in an engineering context, it's still either people roll their eyes and go, is it another off-site activity? Jazz hands and nothing happens as a result of it, or it's a bit of fear. I can't be creative, and so you're right. And when I joined Google 8 years ago to help drive the creative culture, it was a specialism that I was in there as a real specialist. But what's over 8 years, there's one thing that has happened is that I think everybody has spent a bit of time in some context or another, either in a training session or just in their career development, appraising their relationship with this term. So it's good. 8 years on, I'm no longer niche or specialist. It's part of just being a great leader or being a great colleague or operator in whatever you do. But yeah, listen, Sir Ken Robinson started to address this conversation, a few years ago, and it's not 100% objective. So I recognise there's different perspectives here. But yeah, in education, most education platforms and contexts in most of the parts of the world where many of us grew up is largely biased towards knowledge retention and recall, and so therefore that drives a bias of how we look at the world to be much more analytical, judgmental, decision making, the one right answer. So actually I kind of say to people, give yourself a break. You're just not as practiced at using options and possibility. I've developed a very shorthand, given that a lot of online learning now needs to be a lot more punchier. We can't, roll around for days in the topic. So my one slide version of creativity now is creativity equals options. That's all it is the ability to create an option or two more that helps you make a better decision in whatever you're doing. And there is a big thing now actually as well. I'm a lot less wedded to emotional around the word and it being, and in my insistence of it being used. So for example, when I run workshops at Google now, a lot of the time, I don't even use the word creativity because we have to spend too much time having a debate about what it means. If I say to people, right, we're going to share some problem solving skills and approaches now, people are going, right, that's it, great, that's what we do, that's business critical. So that would be one piece of advice to anyone that's listening is, don't feel like, even if you're sitting there going, I get it, right, how do I start to land creativity in my organization, in my team, in myself? What you don't have to land is the title. You have to land the behaviors, the culture, the approaches that help you to look at things and approach things differently. What you don't need to be burdened by is, does everybody love this word creativity? Because some people won't. And that's a harder thing to change overnight than actually the behaviors that we want them to shift or adopt.
Yeah, so you don't have to say we're going to start being really creative now, or we're going to do a whole session just thinking creatively. you can just start thinking about what are the things that we need to do to use the behaviors associated with
That's our
creativity.
point, yeah. Right. What do? I help people. So the point is, we're using creativity to solve. We're not going to be creative because that suggests, like I say, it suggests when times are good or offsites or things like that. We're actually no. We've got a problem. We've got a problem in our bottom line. We've got a code red. We've got a user experience issue. Whatever our world or context is, the case is, let's use creativity to think how we might do that a bit differently so that we can make some decisions that might be different to what we would have made if we just operated on the autopilot mode, which is our default.
Yeah. And we do the autopilot, right? Because it's easier and we know it and we understand it. And we've built years and years of patterns, as you say, through education, through how we do things. Is what we do is we decide an answer. We need to get to the end. We need to find the finish point. We need to find the right thing. But the world doesn't really work with right or wrong, pure answers, does it? It's not, the world doesn't work like that. So we have to almost retrain ourselves.
And where it does, I mean, and this is it, you can see it's scary, right? Isn't it? Because lots of people have got to where they've got to in their career. Well, all of us have to a certain extent, based on technical ability and knowledge-based skills. I know the binary information for that question. And I guess the watch out to that is that we technology can do that very well as well, right? So when people feel threatened, and I think a lot of people kind of ask themselves, "Oh, yeah, technology and automation, that's going to affect my job." I mean, but it's only going to affect the parts of our job that are binary and get it done and repetition tasks. Machines don't need to take a break, if nothing else. But what it does then mean is that actually the parts of our job that are about looking for new or different answers or possibilities or options to solve a challenge, yeah, that's one where we don't naturally lean. But it's also our unique opportunity in the world right now, because that's not what machine learning does very well, or as well as human beings. AI hasn't yet recreated the human brain in all its brilliance. So therefore, that we should be seeing that as that is our USP to the world, is our ability to think differently. And we should be leaning on that more and more, because I see people who sit there and go, 3 days putting a deck together. Very soon, machine learning will learn how you naturally put together your slides. You can press a button and it will do it for you. That can't be that far away. That's no inside knowledge. I just can't believe that that's not something that isn't around the corner. So if we're leaning ourselves too much on our ability to do that versus actually what's in that deck, what's in those slides, what's the thinking that goes into it, and valuing that more. I always say to people, I've sort of, it's a bit of a playful provocation, but whenever I'm with teams, there's two questions I ask them. I'll come back to the other one, and I'm sure we'll touch on that one a bit later. But the one of the questions is, or two parts: do you have a to-do list? Everyone puts their hand up. Do you have a to think about list? And it's less hands, some, but far less hands. I think that's a massive shift in our mindset. Is we are just not conditioned to value the time that we spend just gestating around the stuff that we're working on. Our value comes when we feel like we're getting it done, or input equals output.
So interesting, and I'm going to pick on this point a bit more. One of the things that I often mention around WorkJoy is lots of people get lots of satisfaction from the ticking things off the to-do list, from the achievement. And I think for many years as well, organizations have rewarded people based on how much time you spend getting stuff done, just plowing through. If you're a real workhorse, it's brilliant, you get stuff done. And I remember a few years ago when we first met, you asking that question to a group of people, and I sat there and thought, oh, actually, I don't think I spend enough time on my to think about list. And I actually now do have that as a bit of a habit, as something that I do more often, give myself some thinking time. And I'm wondering, how have you helped people, and how can people think about this in building that as a habit when everybody's lives seem to get busier and busier and busier, and the time for doing things that aren't doing things, like getting stuff done, seems to get smaller and smaller? What's the habit building thing that we can work with?
So I think first thing is a mindset shift. So the point is, it's not thinking time for thinking time's sake. It's in service of something. So this is
Yeah.
the big thing, right? And I think that's how we should think about using creativity or giving it a more credible home on the top table of our skill sets. Anyway, generally creativity is, the world isn't yet turning on a different axis where people are being paid just to think. You will know we're there when law firms and so on can charge clients for sleeping on their problem. It's things like that you'll see that also won't be that far away. It only needs the data to support it, and it's coming. But anyway, that's another thing. But I always, the first thing I say to people is, don't sit there and think, I need to be creative this week, right? It's, what do I need to achieve this week? Right, I've got a massive project that I'm struggling to get buy-in, and I've got to get that bought in from some senior stakeholders. I don't know, as an example. That's your task. That's still what you have to achieve. So don't think of creativity and thinking time as being a distraction from you achieving that task this week. But seeing it as part of it. No one, and likewise, just recognize at the moment, you're not going to, if you don't achieve that task of getting that buy-in on that project from senior stakeholders, no one's going to go, no one's going to pat you on the back and go, but brilliant stuff, you were really creative and we value that. That's we're not there yet either in the world of work where failure is celebrated in the same way. So first thing is, like, that's still my task, but my hope is that people start to recognize that the quality of that task, or how we achieve that task, i.e. my ability to influence people, to persuade them, to communicate, whatever it is that I think about doing, will be bettered by me, one, just stepping back from it and going and allowing it to gestate in my head a bit, rather than always, having to be like, I'm putting stuff down on slides or whatever that looks like. And I guess back to that point more holistically, that I see that there are two ways in which I can approach this task. How I've always approached it, or is there a way or two more different to this that I could explore that might help me to have more impact in that situation? So that's the first thing I always do for people is try and help them to see the difference in the mindset shift that's required. And then some practical things like, do you just schedule time? I mean, that would be a first thing. Now, don't get me wrong, there is something brilliant about our thinking time when it's just allowed to happen naturally. Ask people where they do their best thinking. They don't say, when I've protected an hour to go for a think. They say it's when I'm exercising or walking or in the shower. Number one answer in the world, by the way, the shower. So it's not, you are sacrificing a little bit of your brain's brilliant task negative state, it's called, when your brain naturally gestates and starts to make fresh connections. But the best thing we can do is just to protect that time and go, right, I've just been given this brief, or I've just been given this project to do, or I've just acknowledged that I've got this meeting coming up at the end of the week that I need to have impact with. I'm in the same way that I would put in 2 hours to write the deck or whatever the output is that it's needed to be. I'm also going to schedule time to have a think about it and seeing that of value. And then there's things you can do to fill that time. So who could I phone during that couple of hours that I'm going to spend thinking about this, who might have a different perspective on it? Now, that can be relatively close to my world. Beth, many times we've just collided around some stuff that we're working on away from each other, but just to get a different perspective from someone that you trust, who actually you value, I value the fact that you see the world differently to me. That's brilliant. That's cognitive diversity, and that's great. So that's one technique you can do, is who can I just pick up the phone to? There's a brilliant bit in the book by Brené Brown, Rising Strong, where she talks about the inch square, and there's just this principle of, like, always having 4 people in your mind, that in your network, who you celebrate the fact that they look at the world dramatically different to you, and reaching out to them for different perspectives. So that, that's a structure I could put in place during that time. Now, my push to people is, how crazy can you go there? How, we talk about WorkJoy. How much fun can you have doing that? Because it's one thing for me to go, okay, I'm going to pick up the phone to Beth. She works in a similar world to me, but looks at the world a bit differently. What if I was like, right, what other worlds look at this essence of this challenge that I've got in a totally different way? So let's say the core of my challenge this week is persuasion. I've got these stakeholders I need to get brought in. Actually, that there's an element of that that's about persuasion. well, where else in the world can I go for a totally different perspective on persuasion? Maybe it's people who ask, who propose to somebody else for marriage. Maybe that's, I might get a perspective there. Maybe it's, kids, like looking at the world of children and how they're brilliantly persuasive and so on. So that's where the fun comes as well. So that's an example of one or two of the techniques that I might use. So I'm not just going around going, okay, I'm going to walk around the park 5 times and have a think, although that is really powerful. But for people that aren't there yet, or are just like, it feels like a little bit of I'm really busy, I've got a lot going on, I get that I need to step away and have a think, but I still need it to feel productive. Well, then give yourself some structures like that.
Yeah. So this is the thing, isn't it? Like the idea of just giving yourself some thinking time in some people's heads, and I know sometimes it does in mine if I try and overthink it, is I just need to sit and think. But sitting and thinking doesn't always give me a different perspective or a different idea, or I'm so stuck in my own ways, in my own way of thinking, in my own patterns, in my own behaviors, that trying to think about doing it differently is actually really hard sometimes. So having a conversation or researching someone who thinks differently, or finding out from someone else. And I have to say, I personally think I'm quite creative when I'm with other people. I find being creative on my own not so easy.
Yeah, and it's two different. I mean, often it comes down to how people interpret that word creativity again, and most people would automatically suggest that they're creative in a place where they're on their own, but that is because the brain science says that you're in that mind wandering state often when you're doing a solo task that doesn't require too much brain power, washing up, doing the garden, cooking, walking, exercising, on the running machine or just going for a walk, driving. So you see why people automatically do that, and that's really valuable. But yeah, as well, I always just think about the fact of the matter is that Steve Jobs was right. There is no such thing as a new idea out of the ether. Ideas aren't sitting in the ether and you just have to grab one with a net or something. It's about making fresh connections between the ingredients that already exist in your head. And so if that's the case and you buy that premise, well then 2 brains will always be better than 1, because you've just got, sorry, I'm overplaying the food and the cooking metaphor here, but you've got 2 pantries full of ingredients then, right? And so you've just got more stuff to play with. So absolutely, this doesn't have to be a suffer alone. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna spend my time on my own. Actually, often it's how can I collide with other people? And to be fair, more and more now when I ask people, where do you do your best thinking? I do now hear people saying, oh, just over a coffee with somebody, like with actually somebody in my team, but when we haven't got the laptop open and it feels like we've got to commit to a slide. We're just kicking it around. I see engineers at Google all the time doing their best work over a coffee after lunch, when their laptops aren't there, and that's their expansive moment. And then don't get me wrong, they then go, right, what does that all mean? How am I going to boil it down, make some decisions, get reductive, and then I go and implement it into whatever I'm doing. But, you do hear people say when I'm whiteboarding, there's something about whiteboarding that gives you, subconscious permission to be scrappy, to make mistakes. If there's one thing about PowerPoint, Google Slides, they don't naturally give you permission in your mind to make a mistake. Now, of course, you're always deleting and editing and so on, but you get my point here. It just isn't something that we've kind of grown up with. It's a finished product tool. So,
Yeah.
But what I would say to you is that I would always say to people, some people, extroverts love to think out loud with somebody else, right, with other people. And I often fall into that. I love kicking stuff about. But I do force myself for some moments of reflection as well. And this comes, we're meandering a bit, so apologies. I'm sure you're going to drill me down into some kind of clarity in a moment. But I always, I do a lot of work with teams where we're trying to sort of work on, it's a poor badging, to be honest, because it's a bit crude. But when people are going, well, we've got introverts and extroverts, how do they work together? The fact of the matter is, we all need a bit of both. So we might have a natural leaning. So if my natural leaning is I love to talk things out loud, well then I just have to work a little bit harder about allowing reflection time and a bit of time on my own to gestate. And if I'm the opposite, well, then I might just have to work a little bit harder to pick up the phone to somebody or drop an email and go, can we just kick this around? So I don't see it as binary. It almost suggests that there either is a disability that, that needs to be just respected and left alone. I believe that they are natural things, and it doesn't make it mean that it's easy to do the opposite. But that's what I certainly strive for, is to push myself to do the opposite of whatever I'm naturally inclined to do. So we all have to do a little bit of that. Bit of thinking. I always say, time to talk, time to think. In any project, and when I say project, it might be I've got an hour before a meeting, and in that time I'm like, right, how can I spend 20 minutes just thinking about it, and then some time talking it out or getting it done, should we say? So, and we have to force a bit of both. There's a great book. It's quite an old book now by a guy called Stephen Johnson, called Where Good Ideas Come From, and he kind of coined this expression, the slow hunch, and there is a science in that, just letting stuff gestate in the back of your mind. So to your point, Beth, you don't you find it hard when you are deliberately going, right, I've got an hour to think this through. So if that doesn't work for you, don't force that. But what you can do is go, most people, when I coach leaders and so on, and I look at them, we talk about this stuff, and they go, yeah, but I don't have the time to think about that. Or they'll say the same as you. It just doesn't work for me to sit there and go, right, I've got an hour to think about this. I've got this big presentation coming up on Friday. And I go, when did you first know about this presentation? They go, oh, yeah, it happens every 3 months. And I go, right, okay, so 3 months ago, you knew about this. So what you can, but what we don't do is we're all working to the next deadline, whereas actually step back. If I spend half an hour, on this presentation that's 3 months away, and I don't have to solve it, but just get my brain into gear, get it engaging with the challenge, and then leave it. Just leave it alone for a couple of months. My subconscious brain will work on it in the background, right? Proven. Like you will get some. If you set yourself the challenge of, have I solved this? You might be disappointed. If you set yourself the challenge of, can I get some movement in my thinking by just letting it gestate in the background without any agenda or fixed time, other than when I next sit down to think about it or to do something with it? The answer is almost always yes, I'll have some movement in my thinking. So, sometimes, again, we're probably sort of circling around a theme, which is how we frame it, how we talk about it to ourselves, if not others.
Yeah, I'm going to pull a few things that I wrote down while you were talking, because there were some things that really landed for me, and really important things, I think, around how we do this, but also how we find some joy within the process. Because for me, if you want to get a bit creative, or whatever language you want to use around it, if you want to solve problems, actually trying to do it when I'm trying to do it, if I try and do it too seriously, I lose some of that inspiration. I lose that ability to reach out and find people and to get interested in it. And 2 words really came to mind when you were talking about people grabbing a coffee, and they were, where I get that fresh connection stuff, where I start to see the benefit of other people in it, is that informal space. It's that, let's have a casual conversation. It is grab a coffee. It is do that side of things. And then I find the inspiration comes from the conversations. And then almost what I have to do is then go away and do my thinking when I've had the inspiration. So it's that I do need to do that on my own. And I am probably, nearer to more often being drawn to the extroverted stuff. But when I've got to actually get down and do something, I need to go into my own space with my own calmness. But having had all that inspiration and those connections really helps. And you're right, if I have those connections and then I don't think about it for a while, somehow when I sit down to write something or to create something or to think in a different way, it's all sort of happened for me because I've allowed it to do that gestating thing. And for me, that those 2 bits of advice: make sure you've got time to talk and time to think. And maybe if you do have more of the extroverted tendencies, I mean, I know I do, I tend to have less time to think, and I probably need a bit more of it. So I have to make myself do that, but find a fun way of doing it. And perhaps if you are in the more introverted world, you need to make a little bit more time to talk about some stuff and to reach out. And I totally believe that, in the same way that you do, that we're not all one or the other, and we can't all live in a world which is one or the other and do it exactly as we all want to do at the same time. So yeah, I'm really, really keen to think about where we're here. With the joyfulness, and I know we've talked about this before, is how we can have some fun with this stuff, and how having fun can help create new, different connections, different ways of thinking, different patterns.
So there's a brilliant one of the founders of Google, Larry Page. He's sort of famous for sort of sharing a line, and I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, but he always talks about you don't have to be serious to solve serious problems. And I don't know if he had a deep understanding of the science when he first said that many years ago. But there is a real science in that. The moment you allow the severity or importance of the challenge or the thing that you're working on, or the deadline that goes with it, to take hold of your mental state, your ability for your brain to make any fresh connections at all disappears. I mean, that's science. That's how your brain works. There's no more, the neural pathways or the reticular activating system that connects the conscious to the subconscious, is closed. That doorway is closed. So he always says to people, we're working on important stuff. And I think, give yourself a break. In the context of your job and paying your mortgage and all the things that are important, we're all working on important stuff. Our job is important to us. So, and he always says we're working on important stuff. Doesn't mean we can't enjoy working on it. And I think that's a lovely reframe. You're going in, especially when it's like a bit of troubleshooting. We've got a code red, we've got a shortfall in the number, whatever that is. We got something, we've got to fix it now, which is a common part of most of our kind of working cadence at some point. It's actually the best thing we can then do is like laugh at it, and I think a lot of the time people don't do that because they feel like it's dismissing or belittling the significance of the situation, but not at all. Like, brilliant warm up to any conversation where you want to solve a really important thing is what would be the worst idea we could have right now. And laugh, because if nothing else, it just gets you laughing about some stuff. Although actually there is also a science that if you build up a practice of looking at the audacious and ridiculous, but sit with those initial thoughts. Again, there's a bit of science. There is, the expression, what is it? Many a true word said in jest. There is something in that, right? Your subconscious is sneaking into your conscious brain with some kind of little provocation that there might be value in, right? So if nothing else, warm up to any important conversation or thing you're doing by just going, what would be the most ridiculous thing I could do right now? If nothing else, you'll laugh at it. It will relax your brain. The reticular activating system will open. You're more likely to have some fresh connections and create new options to solve the situation. But actually, as well, if you do genuinely play with it for a while, there'll be some principles in those silly ideas that might actually be the key to the answer. And there's tons of examples of some brilliant ideas in the world that started out as a ridiculous thought said in jest.
It's such an important thing, isn't it? And I can imagine, and we've all been there, haven't we, in those situations, wherever we work, whether that's, in a shop or in an office or in a hospital, where there are genuinely things that have to be fixed, and they are serious, and they're serious, whatever the job is. And, I might say that, the person in the hospital who has to save a life is much more serious than whatever work I do or whatever work someone else does. But within the context of our work, there will be things that are serious. And it's so easy to get lost in the seriousness of it all, and to get stuck in. I find sometimes it's like a bit of a quagmire, isn't it? It's, you get in there and you're all there and you're all so serious about finding a solution. We have to do it by this deadline and we have to do it. And then everyone's minds just goes completely blank. And we go, hang on a minute, well, what did we do last time? Even if it failed, if we just repeat that because we know what we're doing there. And it's just a really hard thing to get out. So I love the idea of just thinking, what's the craziest thing we could possibly do? Because surely when you go crazy, even if you walked it back 2 steps, you might actually find the answer. It doesn't have to be as crazy as
well, that's it. What is it? I've forgotten who it was. Was it Einstein that said, it's unless an idea at first seems absurd, it will rarely turn into anything. And I've totally destroyed that phrase or expression. But there's something in that. It's much easier to take a crazy out there idea and go, right, we love this. How do we keep the DNA of this, but make it fit for purpose in the context that we're in. That's much easier than taking the same old stuff that's having minimum, if no impact at all, and going, right, let's blow it up and be crazy. I mean, that's where people sit there and go, oh my God, I'm not creative. Like the pressure then kicks in because someone says, be creative around this. Whereas just recognize we are naturally creative people. We don't show up to our work context naturally creative, but, we are naturally playful. We like to laugh. Our body reacts well to laughter and fun and so on. It's really hard. You gave a couple of contexts there. Working in a hospital, if you're in the front line of life or death, literally life or death situations, it can be that you might be listening to this and thinking that might be quite hard to accept. But please take it with the spirit it's meant. And actually, what I would say is, having worked with a group of nurses a few years ago who were all at the front line, life or death in accident, emergency, and other professions that are all doing that. Actually, I tend to find that generally they are the best at in the right context and right way, making light of the situation for a couple of reasons. One, because they buy into everything we're talking about. They get it. They go, look, it doesn't pay for me. They might not say it in the same way. We're using we're trying to use very smart language, right? But they might just go, look, it doesn't pay for me to get stressed about this. That is not going to help me to solve it. And that's exactly the same point. It's just said a lot better. And then others just go, well, if nothing else, I'd end up with mental health challenges myself if I wasn't able to put some light on it that helped me to smile or to laugh or to see some benefit or some difference there. So I actually find that a lot of the time the most creative people, particularly in really, really important situations, are those that actually do this pretty well.
Yeah, and I have the same thing. Nurses and doctors and people on the front lines, and in jobs I call that you have like really big decisions to make that are actually life threatening situations and things like that. All of those people I know and I'm friends with or I've worked with all have what I would call, the traditional great sense of humor. They're able to find the fun. They're able to find the moment where they can have a little bit of relief from a very serious thing by having a bit of a joke and doing it in the right way. And, but you're right. Sometimes if they didn't have that, I wonder how would they get through the day? Because I know that I would find that really, really hard. I mean, I do those jobs.
And even if this still doesn't sit well with you, and even if you're still sitting there going, no, I can't laugh at it. But actually the mindset is, this is whatever's going on for you. This is really bad, this situation. But if we get it solved, wouldn't that just be amazing? Like that, if nothing else, that's what we're looking for. When we're talking about lightness of touch, when we're talking about being playful, that's actually what we mean, is just being able to see, not being wedded to the outcome, recognizing that getting stressed about it is not actually going to help you to think through whatever it is you're in, and actually just having a mindset that is like that actually has an eye or a part of your brain fixed on the vision of what would be great if we were able to solve this or we were able to do it. And that's kind of what we mean by this, about enjoying what we're doing, because we can just focus on the output. Another thing that people that I find generally, especially in very important jobs, and we're all in important jobs, they're all that tend to be creative, i.e. that tend to be better practiced. It's a practice skill, by the way, at generating new and different options to help them look at situations, whatever they're in. They all tend to be curious people as well, right? So, and that was something we talked about a little bit before. They are naturally curious about other things. They're also brilliant at being curious about stuff that might not seem relevant today. So that's, at Google, we talk about the smart creative. That's kind of a term that's loosely used to define Googlers, like in whatever capacity your job. Because if there's one thing that unites Googlers, we like people that, we like people that are smart. But smart means people that know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. They've got a lot of experiences, right? So that they're not just fixed. There used to be an expression about this relationship between generalists and specialists, and we always said we like the generalists. And it's not really about that. I'm not sure that language kind of worked for us as much as it should have, and it's not something we hear as much anymore. But what we do mean is by generalists is that we love people that have got lots of experience, lots of stuff going on, because the easiest way to make a fresh connection between a challenge that you're working on is to have other experiences that you can make those connections to. So when you just have someone that's only obsessed with deep technical expertise in their very defined field, the watch out is that all you're doing is building that binary autopilot response, whereas being curious, going, all right, it's got nothing to do with my job today, but I'm going to go and have a look at some Georgian architecture because it's a bit different. I don't know, and there's a lot of it around where I live, or something like that. And I think the difference is, and that's the creative bit. So the smart is people that know a lot of stuff about stuff about a lot of stuff, but unless they're practiced at making fresh connections between all that stuff, then you're losing the battle to technology, because no one, if it's just binary information, well, there's a thing called Google that kind of does that pretty well, So, yeah. But what humans, back to my point, what humans will do better is, the practice skill of making fresh connections between the stuff we need on demand.
Yeah. I'm also kind of thinking back to the word that you use, two words you used there as being really important. And the first one is playful, which is not a word we often use associated with work in many cases.
Yeah.
Neither is joy, which is why WorkJoy is thinking about how to associate these things together, and how important curiosity is as a practice that you do all the time. Get interested, get curious, even if, and I love that you were saying there, even if right now it doesn't seem like that particular thing will have a solution for you, just having that range of thinking, being interested, being curious. And when you were talking about those things, Kirk, talking about playful and curious and interested and coming up with go with the crazy idea for a bit, because why not? It's all stuff children do naturally. So it has been in our brain somewhere to be able to do this.
Oh yeah, listen, it's and it's I do get people when I'm in face-to-face workshops. I do get people to put their hands up if just to acknowledge that they were a child. I'm not sure. There will be a time where we will have AI sitting in the room and it won't be possible. But we were all children, yeah. So we've lost that practice. And listen, I've got to acknowledge there's a couple of ththings that come to mind. John Cleese says it brilliantly. Monty Python and Fawlty Towers. Many of you will know who I'm talking about. He says you can't make mistakes when you're being creative. I love that. Now, and what he's brilliant about, and when I talk about creativity, I talk about the two modes of thinking: expansive and reductive. And the point is, you can make mistakes when you're reductive. You can make the wrong decision. You can, if you've created lots of options, you could analyze, judge that, and make the wrong call. Right? That's possible. But when you're actually just coming up with options to work with, you can't make any mistakes because they're just options. And and I think it's a lot. So he says it best. The word playfulness, I got to give credit to an organisation called What If, where I worked for a few years, and I've never been anywhere where the power of culture has been so brilliantly defined and used to the power of an organisation. So that's where certainly that word I started to latch on, because they used it as a way to remind each other to not be wedded to the outcome and having a lightness of touch around any situation that you're working on. So sort of credit to them. That was and they've got or databases full of case studies of where they only solved the innovation problem that they were working on for a company or an organization or a team because of playfulness. And so I think sort of fair play to that. So 100% all this is, it's vital, but it's also really hard. It goes against it. I'm at work, it's serious. We've got a lot of years of our own career in most of us, and certainly in the business world or corporate world or working world, should we say, because not just business and corporate, we've got to unpack that relationship with work, because most people don't. And this is why it's brilliant, the work that you're doing, right? Because it's just getting people to stop and go, does work have to be serious? And can you not? I mean, I think Henry Ford, didn't Henry Ford used to dock people money from their salary if they saw them smiling at work? Because his point was, you're not here to have fun, you're here to work. So we have got a history of where work is associated with seriousness and the home life is associated with fun and playfulness. And we've got So it's not going to be easy to unpack that. And if you're listening to this or any of the other sort of podcasts that you've done, Beth, people, give yourself a break is what I'd say to people. It's not easy. It's not going to change overnight, because we're working against a system.
We are. And the thing that I keep saying around WorkJoy is, it's not about finding it all the time. It's not 100%. And it is not, as you said, it's not going around with a crazy smile on your house and jazz handsing your way around work joyfully every day. That's not the goal. It's around finding the moments of joy and using joy to help you be better at work, or to help the working situation change, or to do what you want to do. And that idea that you're just talking about there, is like, home is for fun, work is for seriousness, is work and home are so, particularly right now with a global pandemic on, and lots of people are working from home or in a different way than they've worked before, is they're not so separate anymore. The boundaries aren't like that. But almost some of our culture hasn't caught up with the idea that our boundaries aren't like that anymore. And it always feels like a bit of a tussle in one direction or another. So for me, when we find WorkJoy, it's about those moments. It's about that, bringing those things in, and playfulness is a massive and important part of that. And just bringing some ideas, I love what you said about lightness of touch and not being so wedded to the outcome, but work on the process. And one thing I'd love to talk about, but before we finish off and I ask you some quickfire questions, is this idea that it is a skill you build, not something you have or you don't have. And so many of us, I think, are very quick to put something that we haven't built as a skill, or that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about or learning about, into I can't do that, this is what I'm good at, these other things are what I'm good at category. So I'd just love to know, what are some of the things that people can do to build that skill? Simple things.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing, sorry, this one isn't simple, but I'll follow it up with some very quick, simple things. The first thing is, we've got to change our relationship with failure, or risk of failure. Right. So, and God, we could spend a whole session talking about that. So I'll try and avoid it. But if you stop and think about that, I again, it's another question that I'll ask teams and leaders when I first meet them, is, where does failure live around here? Or where's its safe place? Because fundamentally, if you haven't got a happy relationship with risk of failure, should we call it? Failure is a bit defeated. It says it's going to fail. Risk of failure, maybe that sits a bit better for people. So, but if you haven't got a positive relationship with it, then you'll never try anything new or different. So that's the first thing, is sit and start to appraise your relationship with things not working, because that is one thing with creativity. There are no guarantees. Okay, I can't tell you that you coming up with 3 new ways to tackle the challenge you've got going on right now will yield better impact than the autopilot way that you were going to do it based on how you did it before. But I'm confident more options will, back to his point, options equal better decisions. That's the point here. So I think we've got to. First thing is, so back to some practical things that might link to that. Where is your safe to fail experimental zone, shall we call it? Like, where's your innovation lab? Big corporations have innovation labs where essentially budget is protected for people to fail loads. I think in the tech world in general, someone did a back of an envelope, and it's about 81% of the time the tech world fails. Like that. That's brilliant that there is that positive relationship with it. We don't need to be as formal as that, but what we do need to go, where am I allowing myself to try new things? Eddie Jones, the head coach of the England senior men's rugby team, has given me the best answer to that I've ever had. Mondays, he said immediately, as soon as I asked the question, didn't even think about it. And his point is, we shouldn't be failing on a Saturday, game day. But if we're not trying new stuff that we know might not work, if we're not experimenting on a Monday, the furthest point away from game day, there physically isn't another day that we could do it. So, and I thought that was brilliant. So where's that safe to fail place for you? Maybe, I did some work with Google's cloud team, our enterprise. There's quite a long sales cycle with the commercial team. And, for them, it's the start of the quarter. The start of the quarter is when you should be rapidly trying to have meetings that aren't going to go 100% right, but go with it. There's some stuff there. And then be more deliberate then about back ending your really important meetings where you might learn something from the stuff you tried, and then you can apply it with more confidence. So you have to do a bit of thinking there, but sit with that would be one thing to help us to kind of build that better relationship with potential failure, because you have to. And then other things very quickly, what can we do to build the practice? So it might just be what's back to, there's a few things. One thing might be, who can I speak to this week who would give me a very different, what's one challenge I've got going on this week, and who can I go and talk to who I know would give me a totally different perspective from my own echo chamber. Matthew Syed, the former Olympian, now I think he's a psychologist and is certainly an author of 2 brilliant books. He uses this language of the echo chamber that we're in, which is essentially all of the voices of the deep expertise that look at the challenge in the same way. So who can I, it might just be that weekly act of having a coffee with someone who might have a different perspective. There's a great quote in Silicon Valley, which is, wherever you work, the smartest people work somewhere else. And the point is, it's a reference to the fact that actually it's someone's naivety or lack of emotion and emotional connection to the challenge, the actual challenge you're working on, that will allow them to see things that you're missing. So how do we do that? That might be one practiced act. What could be another practice act? Have a to think about list. Give it a go. The important thing about it is, it shouldn't be anywhere near as long as your to-do list. In fact, my thing would be, just have a to think about list that's only ever got one thing on it. That one thing should change regularly, but just one thing on it, because it will just prompt you just to think about it while you're having a coffee, it'll just become part of your natural act. And really value time. Like the quicker you can seed stuff into your conscious brain and then forget about it, your subconscious will work on it when you're pushing the kids on the swings, when you're making dinner, when you're doing the vacuuming, and then all you actually then need is the brilliance of your smartphone, which is the ability to capture a note and just keep it in there, and then you'll come back to it later. So there's a couple of things, and I could go on, but there's a few things that we could do.
I also think we could probably spend a whole day, couldn't we, on this, giving all of the different things you could do. But those are, I think, really great examples, that time, putting it in your brain and then letting your brain work it out. I love that idea. Get it in there quickly and see what happens. I'm old school, so I actually leave little notebooks around the house that I write things down in.
Exactly.
Versus the smartphone. I probably should go for the smartphone. I have one of those as well, but just for me.
Listen, I'm actually just trying to give people a break, because yes, a notebook is better. There's something ironic about calling it a smartphone, isn't there? Because actually the digital distractions that it causes for us, that stops our ability to think and so on, are anything but smart. Although it does a lot of other amazing things that that have changed our lives. But yeah, listen, if you can, a good old analog notepad and a notebook is always powerful too.
Yeah. And I'm just really reflecting back on how clear Eddie Jones was about where the space to fail is, and how we could interpret that in our own worlds, for us individually, or maybe for our teams, if we're leading teams, around where is that space. And there will be space. You just might have to think about it and understand your own cycles, your own rhythms, your own ways of working, as to where within that it makes sense for you. So totally get that. I am now going to move on, if you're okay, Kirk, to our quick fire questions.
Do it.
Right, let's go for it. So question number 1 is, and this is a really personal one, Kirk, so go with it.
Okay.
What is always, for you, guaranteed to bring you a bit of work joy?
Oh, what is always guaranteed to bring me a bit of work joy? Connecting it back to the benefit to my family. So that might sound a little bit fickle or superficial, but listen, we all talk about driven by a purpose, but my purpose is to work hard to give my family the best that they can have, and things like that. So whenever I'm able to link an important stuff to what that then might mean to just me being able to celebrate my family, or what that might mean, even just basic stuff like pay, and stuff like that, being able, all of those things. So that for me, anything I can do to connect it back to helping me and my family have nice things and maybe do nice stuff.
Love that. And that's just a perfect description of what I was talking about before, about the fact that work and home are so connected. We can't disconnect them. They are part of each other.
I feel like people might be disappointed and probably expecting me to say something far more profound about the impact that we're having on the world, and there is that. But listen, that's the reality. Listen, I work hard to help kind of give my kids the best that I possibly can, and there's limits to that regardless. But it's so and along when I was 20, my first job, my boss, and I thought she was a bit out there, but she told me to have a dream account. She opened up a dream account for me, and it was this. And she said, "What's the thing you wanted?" And it was I was 20. It was like a Porsche. And she said, and she was like, and she would just put in small amounts of money into this bank account, which she let me take with me when I left the company. And the point was, it was just something that would connect. It was a token thing that started to just create a habit in my mind of connecting it to to the benefit that I get from going that extra mile, not just for the people that I'm helping, but actually for myself as well.
Yeah, love that. And I think when you think about it, so many people are working to support their family. That's the reason that they get up and go to bed. Not everyone has a loftier purpose in their job. Not everyone can. Not everyone wants to. Some people want to go to work, do a really great job so that they can pay the bills, so that they can look after their kids. And that's, I think, one of the most important things in life and work, is to remember that there is that stuff, normal stuff. What book are you currently reading, or one that you would recommend to our readers?
Oh, I started reading, literally I'm like 2 pages in to a book called Loon Shots. So there's a Google expression called moonshots, which some of you might be familiar with, and which is all about sort of big audacious thinking and then reining it in. At Google we talk about 10x thinking, which is actually about blowing up your creating such an extreme articulation of your challenge that your brain is forced to think about it differently. But actually, the ideas don't need to be extreme. You're just your brain is just making fresh connections. This book by and I'm going to pronounce the name terribly, Safi Bahcall, Bahcall, is actually just a brilliant sort of journal of some of the most crazy, audacious, out there ideas that have changed the world. So it kind of links back to one of the first things we were talking about as well. But yeah, Loon Shots, crazy ideas.
I'm going to order that one right now.
How to nurture the crazy ideas that win wars, cure diseases, and transform industries.
It sounds amazing. I'd love to read that. And real stories of actually it working is good to hear. Right, question 3 for you. What's the best or most useful piece of advice that someone's given you that you always come back to?
It was so, and it links to stuff we've talked about today. And there'll be loads. I'm sure I'm going to kick myself and get off this call, and I'll remember something else. But be happy, be productive. So a former boss of mine, a guy called Nick Hewitt, when I worked in radio, I think he now works at The Guardian. But a brilliant leader, a brilliant manager, and actually it was an expression from, I've forgotten the lady's name, but she was former CEO of Go Airlines, if you remember that airlines. I think they sold themselves to BA. So he kind of like basically just took that expression and with pride, and would always say it. It's basically, if you're not happy in what you do, go and do something else. Like that's the fundamental of it. And I don't think Nick quite knew. Again, I don't think he quite knew the science that was underpinning it. He was coming at it from a much more about a well-being, a mental well-being, and a happiness a situation. But again, actually, it stuck with me because I always go back to it. There was more in that than what he probably intended. Back to this thing around the science. Be happy, be happy, be productive. You'll get good stuff. So there you go.
Yeah, and I find it's so much easier to be productive if you're happy.
Oh yeah.
And vice versa. It's actually much easier to be happy when you're being productive. When you're not getting stuff done, it can actually be quite miserable, can't it? So it's a reciprocal thing, I feel.
Yeah.
Okay. Question. So turning this around to your advice now, I would love you to share one tip that's really easy that people could go and do after listening to this. Like, do it straight away. Don't need any equipment. Don't need any like massive things to make it happen, that they could do to go and get a bit more work joy in their lives.
Go for a walk. Just go for a walk, and or get outside, fresh in the natural light, fresh air. There may be people listening to this where going for a walk is harder for them for whatever reason. But if you can, get outside and go for a walk. And then if you want a bit more on it, go and just go for a walk with one thing in your head that you want to think about. I've got this meeting coming up this afternoon. How might I make that a bit more interesting? How can I have a bit more impact? Yeah. Whatever it is. But yeah, if there's one thing, just build it in. Physical motion, natural light, fresh air, physical motion, all these things help us to engage the brain state, the frequency that helps us to start to relax and make fresh connections between the stuff we've got going on. So, and even if you kind of feel like, back to your point, Beth, sometimes it's quite hard to force it, but then don't force it, just go for a walk. And I guarantee, especially if you don't take your phone, you will start to think about some stuff and so on. So just use it more as a technique. I coach leaders, and some of them do this, right? And they go, yeah, I'm really good. I step away from my desk and I'll go to the gym for half an hour. I'll go for a quick run or whatever. And then I get them to look at their calendar, and they've just marked it as private, do not disturb. I'm like, you need to be celebrating that. So again, if you do that and you're a leader, make sure you're role modeling it, right? Because that's what we need to be doing. There's a brilliant expression I heard last year at a conference, Future of Learning conference, which I've stolen with pride. Busy is the new stupid, right? And there is just this, and again, the science is there. If you think about it hard enough, the more you're just at your desk racking your brain trying to think through some stuff, it ain't going to happen. So step away, go for a walk, give yourself an hour, and just give your brain a bit of time to do its brilliant stuff.
And almost everyone can make that happen at some point in their week, can't they? Even if it's once a week, just build the habit and see how it goes for you.
Yeah.
Love it. Final question for me, and this should be an easy one from you, is where can people find out more about you if they're interested in your work? I know you work in Google, but also many other projects. Just so maybe where they can get in touch with you if they've got questions.
Yeah. So listen, I'll give if it's okay, I'll give my email address. That's always a good one. So Kirk T Vallis, KirkTVallis @gmail.com is always good. I'm not really on social media. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn and you can connect with me there. That's always great. I'm really sorry to anyone that's ever connected with me or followed me on Twitter or Instagram or something, because I don't post anything. It's too much. That would make me a busy fool, right? And maybe I'll change that at some point, because I'm not saying I don't see the value of it, but apologies if you're looking for that. But yeah, please listen, reach out, and to the point that I'm always up for curious conversations to kick about stuff with people who look at the world very differently to me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kirk, for coming along today and joining me on the WorkJoy Jam. It's been fantastic. I think we could talk for another 3 or 4 hours at least.
I'm
not sure everyone was going to listen to us for that long. So thank you, and have a great rest of the week and the weekend, and hopefully we might speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Beth.
Thank you for listening to the WorkJoy Jam. I think Kirk has such a great way of thinking about everyday creativity, about some of the things that you can do to bring some creativity, to bring some options, to bring some thinking, different perspectives into your world. I really like this quote from John Cleese from Fawlty Towers, is that you can't make mistakes while you're being creative. What an interesting thought is that being creative in itself is somewhere where you cannot make mistakes. And I think for me, the other thing I'm really taking away is this idea of having a to-think list that only has one thing on it. And I don't know about you, our lovely listeners, but my to-do lists usually have way too many things on them that are impossible to achieve in a day. Yet having one thing on a to-think list, just to have it there to prompt yourself to maybe think about while you're having a coffee, could be a really great way of making sure that we're allowing our subconscious brain to actually work on the things it needs to work on and provide us with solutions in the time that we need them. Thank you all for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. Do let us know your feedback. You can tag us on Instagram @CreateWorkJoy and tell us what you're doing as a result of this podcast. We'd love to see that. And we would love to hear who else you might want to hear from. So do get in touch and let us know. Thanks very much.